Welcome to the Rural Futures Institute at the University of Nebraska. I'm Chuck Schroeder. I'm Executive Director of the Institute, and this is our weekly conversation with somebody fun, smart, interesting that we like.
Pressure.
And we call this Catch Up with Chuck, and we're glad that you're joining us. Well, I have to say that I have looked forward to today's guest. Jessica Shoemaker is a very distinguished colleague from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln College of Law. She is a longtime friend of the Rural Futures Institute and a fellow with us. So welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. Thanks.
Glad to have you with us. Okay, so 4.5 years ago, my first day on the job at the Rural Futures Institute, I'm meeting with my then boss, Ronnie Green, who was Vice Chancellor and Vice President for Agriculture and Natural Resources, now Chancellor at UNL. Ronnie's a longtime friend. And he said, I want to give you a piece of advice. There's somebody you need to get to know. You need to meet Jessica Shoemaker at the College of Law. He said she's brilliant, she's passionate about rural issues. Though earlier in her career, she already has a national reputation for her work in land tenure law, particularly around native communities. She's going somewhere. I think she'd be a great asset to the Rural Futures Institute. Your call. Well, it turns out Ronnie was absolutely right on all counts. We've been proud to be associated with Jessica really from day one with the Rural Futures Institute. And by the way, you were selected for the inaugural class of RFI Fellows, which was no small deal. We had a long list, and you made the short one. So that's been fun. But Jess, I'm going to sort of jump in the middle of the story here. You're a distinguished scholar. You've had a great academic career, high achiever all the way along. You could be successful in any academic realm. Why rural?
That's a big question. So first I have to say it's very funny that you start with Chancellor Green, because what he didn't tell you was that I was like chomping at the bit to engage with Rural Futures Institute. So I actually came to Nebraska when I was looking at offers and deciding where to go because I was so excited about this. So even if you hadn't wanted me, I probably would have like pushed my way in.
I wouldn't have been able to resist.
Right. But I mean the Rural Futures Institute was just such a platform for engaging on rural issues. So it was a huge part of why I decided to come to Nebraska. And I mean, I have the story of growing up as a rural kid and a 4-H kid and on an acreage and with a long family history of farmers and people who are connected to place in a really important way.
Yeah.
And just that kind of personal affinity for rural communities and rural life. But I actually think it's important to say that I don't think that's a prerequisite to caring about rural issues. So
Agreed.
I have that, but I also think I think I'd be interested in this even if I didn't, because I think thinking about the future of rural places is intellectually and academically such a stimulating and complicated question, given just the rapid change that we're experiencing. It also is just this really important question for the world, right? Like these big changes are happening. And
Sure.
It's a chance and opportunity to really think about how we want the future to look. And it's also really interesting for me because it's this marriage of physical landscapes and rural landscapes and natural resources in place, and then the human dimension of that right on top of it, and that interrelationship is really important, and that's really what a lot of my work is about. So for me, it's this kind of perfect natural fit.
Well, that's what I hope to hear. Because so often, quite honestly, when we get into that question, people say, well, I grew up on a farm,
Yeah.
Well, that's a foundation for a poet. I'm not sure it's a foundation for a scholar.
Right.
And anyway, you think about things in such interesting, complex ways, and that's a great rationale. Okay, so you touched on it, but listen, I think it's important for members of our audience, by the way, who are lots of moms and families. We know that because Facebook lets you check all that out.
Yeah.
So we know that we have folks out there who are thinking about where their son or daughter might go to school, or where they might have a relationship with an institution. So I think getting to know someone like you in the heart of the academy is important. So I want folks to get to know you both as a scholar and as a human being. Now, setting modesty aside, I want you to give us a profile of your academic career, beginning #1 in your class at the University of Wisconsin Law School. You were clerk at the 10th Circuit U.S. District Court of Appeals. You've done some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, and then we'll talk a bit about what got you there.
Sure. Okay, so just kind of the academic side or the professional side first. So I went to the University of Iowa for undergrad, and I thought that I might want to be a lawyer at some point, and then thought, no, I don't want to do that. And I went and I did kind of community organizing, nonprofit work in Wisconsin and Wyoming for a couple of years. And then the law school thing kind of kept calling. So I went there and I thought, I'm never going to be a lawyer. I'm just going to go check out, sort of how the world works and learn about that. But it turned out that I just loved law school, and I actually loved all the experiences I had there, and I loved being a lawyer. So I did go to the University of Wisconsin for law school. I did a lot of work with reservation communities, tribal governments, tribal courts there in law school. And then I did clerk for a wonderful judge in Denver on the U.S. Court of Appeals, which was just a tremendous learning experience as a baby lawyer. And then another cool thing I got to do, I had a 2-year public interest fellowship that was funded by the Skadden Foundation,
Sure.
which funds new lawyers to get salary for 2 years, and they say, here's the freedom to fail. Just go work at a nonprofit and do the work that you think is important and try something that you wouldn't get to do otherwise. And I worked at Farmers Legal Action Group in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is a national nonprofit working on issues related to family farmers and rural communities and using a lot of different legal strategies to approach those issues. So I did everything from right after Katrina, I was doing clinics for farmers on disaster relief in Louisiana and the Gulf Coast after Rita, and then doing advocacy work, impact litigation, working on minority farmer issues in particular. And then I went to big international private law firm in Denver and did big litigation, worked for tribal governments, did some energy work, did commercial litigation, and just learned a ton. But through it all, I really hoped that I would be able to come and work on a faculty at some point, so I made that transition here in 2012. And I do teach law students, love the law school, the community here, and my work is mostly on American Indian land tenure and rural development issues.
Sure. Well, what's always been interesting to me is I've watched you and been able to associate with you over the last 4 years, is that you're all in with the College of Law,
Yeah.
all right, and the work there, but your fascination to me always seems to be rooted in how this impacts people. You have this advocacy root in you that fortunately then takes advantage of your intrigue with the law. And I think that's cool. And I know your engagement with students really means a lot to you. So we're delighted that you are here in the academy engaging with students rather than locked up in some big office building in Denver.
Yeah, it's my privilege. It's so fun. I love it.
So, okay, but let's step back and look at the Jessica that found herself eventually going to law school.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your upbringing and kind of the values foundation that came from that led you in this direction.
Yeah, well, I grew up mostly in central Iowa. My dad was a plant scientist at Iowa State, and my mom was a kindergarten teacher at a rural school in central Iowa. We did all the 4-H projects. I did this big citizenship project on how a bill becomes a law, which I now look back on and I think, that's sort of what I teach my students in some ways. So learn that in 4-H and some other stuff. So I certainly had, that sort of great community and school system and family support, and that lessons of, it's important to give back and be of service and care about the people around you, and you're connected to those people. I think the really transformative thing for the specific work that I do right now, so I'd done kind of the community organizing stuff, but I'm actually an example of the power of mentors in college and summer experiences. So I know the Rural Futures Institute serviceship project, I kind of did a parallel of that basically changed my life. So I was in law school with my very confident, I will never be a lawyer, I just want to learn about how the world works. And then literally saw a flyer in the stairwell for, I think it said something like, legal externs in rural America, or who owns rural America, or something like that. And it was about property and land ownership in rural places. And it was like everything just sort of clicked, where I'd been doing this other work and I hadn't really put together that I wasn't just doing nonprofit work, I was doing nonprofit work directed at rural communities specifically, and that was something I really cared about. And I ended up getting placed with an Indian probate judge, in a federal Indian probate judge. She worked on reservations in North and South Dakota, had no sort of context or information for that placement whatsoever, and just had this transformative summer experience with a judge and a law professor back at Wisconsin who just really supported me. And it was an instance where I just felt like I could really see the law having this very direct impact on a community and on people in a way that didn't seem right to me, in a way that I was really encouraged to kind of keep pursuing. And now that's a thing that I continue to work on and think a lot about. So those experiences really make a difference.
You know, we see that theme weaving through our work here over and over and over again. And for folks who think the academic experience is about passing all your tests and checking boxes in some structure, it always comes down to people. And so we have 26 students in 13 communities this summer across Nebraska, and actually beyond Nebraska a little bit. But this is our 6th year of that program. We know every year that the community leaders are going to come back to us saying, oh my gosh, these kids did things in our community that we couldn't do in 5 years. And the students are going to come back saying, this changed my life. This set a new course for my career. And it all is about meeting people and saying, I want to be like her.
And especially when it's connected in a university environment like this, so that there's really this encouragement of just reflect on what you just experienced, and let's put this in context with the kind of critical thinking and analysis that you're doing in other areas. For me, that was what was really transformative too. I had this life-changing on-the-ground experience, but then I also got to come back and really reflect hard about what that meant and think about it intentionally in a way that made a big difference for me.
Sure. Okay, so most people would think of a law professor as being this pretty disciplined, straight down, here are the
I'm not sure
here are the boxes we take off the shelves. Okay, so I think one of the most interesting experiences that we've had with you at the Rural Futures Institute was your research into how to use games to help people figure out how to get comfortable with the complex, sometimes messy decision-making that has to be made around land use in and around communities. Your work on Plainsopoly, you've already noted that I've got a box of parts here on my shelf, but that was really interesting and actually ended up in an international experience for you. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and that actually all started at a Rural Futures conference. So it was before your time, but I think it was right before you started.
Right.
One of the first.
I was at
Rural
the conference.
Futures, yeah, Rural Futures. Right. Somehow Mark Gustafson talked me into doing a game for one of the workshop sessions in collaboration with this international partner, Alistair Scott, who had done a version of this kind of land use participation, kind of vision building, conversation starting game. And so we wanted to create a version that took what Dr. Scott had done in the UK and translate it to the Great Plains and the Nebraska context. And it was just a perfect example for me of what RFI really facilitates and can make possible, because we got together a group of faculty and grad students and community stakeholders from different disciplines who looked at the world in different ways to try to think, based on research, what are the questions that matter and what are the issues that are most relevant if we were going to actually sit around a table with diverse stakeholders who might not otherwise come together and have a conversation about what would we want this place to look like in the future, and really think intentionally about it. So we brought these people together, we got these sort of great questions and great themes, and then we made a map with some questions and a literal game, right? Which sounds a little silly, but we actually found the game was just really evocative for people, and it also was safe in a way that it was realistic but slightly hypothetical. So sometimes when it can be hard to talk about property rights, and it can be particularly hard to talk about a neighbor telling you what they think you should do with your property, right? We're sort of sensitive about that. And so that kind of hypothetical game environment let people talk about things that are otherwise kind of difficult to talk about, perhaps. And then it led to this international grant funded by the UK government, where Dr. Scott and some other UK colleagues brought in us from the Rural Futures Institute, an Australian colleague, someone from Sweden, and I went over to the UK and went to Wales and UK and Wales, and did these workshops, and we ended up creating a whole toolkit for different communities really around the world to use these resources to create tools for having these kinds of vision-making conversations about place. So now it's called Participology. It's actually online, participology.com. There's a whole open access toolkit that this kind of workshop session led to. And it really, it's actually pretty powerful when people sit down and have those conversations. A lot of, when you think about kind of complex problems like what the future of rural places might look like, I mean, what it really requires is a lot of local innovation and local experimentation and intentionality about what that desired future is. And unless you come together and hear different perspectives to kind of innovate and have those ideas, it's harder to make progress without that. So this is just one of many tools.
Well, I just have to say, I have seen the tool used in a workshop that one of the natural resource districts hosted, and in a region where those local conflicts are very real. And I was amazed at how people engaged. Indeed, you were one step removed from you're talking about me and my land, but there was clearly movement through the course of the day and the way people engaged with each other and listening to each other about why you're concerned about this and what my role is and responding to that. And so anyway, I think that was...
Yeah, and it's all open and free, so we let people use it and you can adapt it for your needs, whether it's to speed learning about these issues or to create new ideas or solve conflicts. It's got lots of different uses.
Well, cool. Okay, so Jess, one thing that we know is that we've gone through your track record as a faculty member, and we know you're a distinguished scholar. I also know you're a mom.
Yeah.
You're a dedicated mom, raising your girls in a very rural setting. You're doing that on purpose. That's not an easy balance for someone with your career responsibilities. Most of your colleagues don't live just down the road from you. They're a good bit handier to campus.
Yeah.
Tell us why you are making that choice. I was getting ready to say making that sacrifice, because I think there are sacrifices.
There's a lot of driving.
Yeah, but you've also made a very conscious choice to do that, and I've seen you with your girls at my place, and so I know that you're serious about them really understanding this environment in which they're living.
Yeah, I mean, well, my girls are just great, so I might cry at any moment when I talk about them, but I adore them. And
I think they're fun.
Thanks. I used to joke all the time that I was intentionally trying to raise feral children, but it's not so funny. Now that they're getting older, they don't think that's funny anymore, and that's not actually what it's about. But I don't know, I mean, it just feels right. Like, it's just a kind of a mom instinct. This feels like the right place to raise my little girls, but I mean, sometimes I say that, there's lots of parts of parenting that are super hard, and that I question and kind of interrogate on an ongoing basis. But the one thing that I never question is early mornings in the garden with the chickens running around, or late nights with friends when they're playing Ghosts in the Graveyard way in the dark, way out in the woods. I just feel like that's just this core part of their childhood, and that kind of open space to just be whoever they want to be and explore and be creative and get super dirty. I just like it. And they're thriving. We're in a great school district outside of Lincoln that has been really great for them, and they've really made great connections. We have lovely neighbors, and it's just a really perfect place for us, for our family.
Sure. Well,
I hope that's a really good answer.
It's a great answer, because I will tell you, when we had you and your girls out at Eagle Camp, there are kids that come. We're always delighted to have kids around, but there are some who, when they go to the barn, they're pretty shy about the horses and about their cats around and this and that. Your girls were not remotely intimidated by any of that, and just their curiosity and their willingness to just go engage and learn, and I just thought it was terrific. So I thought something really good is happening here.
Yeah, there's a richness, I think, to their experience of just being able to kind of make their own space.
If they end up in Chicago, they'll be the kind of people you'd like to have as a neighbor.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. Well, listen, Jess, you're just one of the gifted human beings that we've had a chance to work with here, and you're using those gifts to really improve the world for people in their communities. So it's just been a real treat over the last 4 years to enjoy your collegiality, your willingness to challenge my own thinking about things. That's been part of the fun. And to just know your unfailing loyalty to the mission of the Rural Futures Institute. So anything you'd like to add?
No, I mean, well, thank you so much for everything that you've done for Rural Futures. We're going to be super sad to lose you, but hopefully not lose you permanently, just in a different capacity.
Drifting, yes.
Different capacity. I would put in a little pitch for the law school. On some
Yeah,
of the
I wanted to
things.
give you the opportunity to talk about.
Just for anyone who's listening and thinking about access to justice issues or law school connections with rural places, something that the law school cares a lot about. We've got our clinics that are doing outreach in Greater Nebraska on an ongoing basis. So I think there's a estate planning clinic happening in Chadron this summer. Our entrepreneurship clinic is doing really cool things with entrepreneurs who are trying to
Right.
start businesses outside of Lincoln and Omaha. I have students work with tribal governments across the country on an ongoing basis. So there's lots of cool kind of stuff happening where the law school is trying to be connected, but then also we've got these programs where at Chadron, Wayne State, and UNK, students can actually get a scholarship for undergraduate degrees. And if they sort of have an interest in rural practice and then want to come to the law school, and we'll kind of help facilitate that going back into rural communities where we need more lawyers, and
Right.
that would be great. So I would invite people to kind of check that out too.
Nebraska's really been at the leading edge of,
Yeah.
of that
Yeah, the State Bar
very
Association.
purposeful
Yep.
work in encouraging smart young people interested in the law to think about a practice in a rural community.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been really my colleagues at the law school have done great work. I can't really take credit for a lot of that, but the Bar Association is doing great stuff. The state supported a loan repayment program, so we're really trying some good efforts there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, listen, we want you to stay in touch with the Rural Futures Institute through our website, through Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. Next week, so you know, is going to be our final episode of Catch Up with Chuck. We're going to look back over what's now been 30 episodes, will be 30 episodes of this program. It's been great fun, and I hope you'll join us. Thanks.